Welcome to the Raptors Weekly Podcast. I'm your host, William Liu. I'm joined today on this special occasion by a special guest, Matt Moore, who many of you guys know from CBS Sports. Find him on Twitter at HPBasketball. You've undoubtedly come across Matt. So, Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here. Excited to piss off Raptors fans in a whole new medium.
That's what I mean, right? We brought you into quote-unquote enemy territory so you can... No, I'm kidding. Matt has... I don't know. I mean, I guess at times frustrated Raptors fans, but I feel like, Matt has at times frustrated every single fan base. I think that's what makes Matt great. He hates your team.
I'm an agitator. I mean that's true. Again, I'm an agitator. I think a lot of it is that I'm always trying to figure out kind of where teams stand in the bigger picture, where they exist, how good they are. Because a lot of teams, the biggest thing that I learn every single year, and especially in the early season, this is evident. And I got fought with editors about this because they're like, no, like a win's a win. I'm like, no. In an 82-game season, a win is not a win. There are good wins and there are bad wins, and it is very possible for you to have a lot of bad wins, and it's very possible for you to have a lot of good losses. Like, it's just not the same. And so with the Raptors, I was skeptical 2 years ago when they had that really magical run, because I was just like, I just don't see this as sustainable. I just don't think this is going to work long term. And they kept racking up wins. DeRozan got hurt. They kind of fell off a cliff, but they managed to keep it just enough. And I picked against them in the first round and was validated for all that skepticism. But last year I was super high on them, and I continue to be I'm very high on them this year. Actually, I'm really high on them. So when I say things like DeMar DeRozan's run is unsustainable, it's really great in an unsustainable way. It's not meant to be like, you shouldn't be enjoying this, it's nothing. It's just, no, this is really awesome. You should enjoy this now. I mean, it's not like he's all of a sudden going to keep doing this. That's not going to happen. But that's okay, because it's really great right now.
Yeah, I think that's something to keep in mind, too, because, you have been... you have been critical at times, but I think it's been fair, and a lot of the times that has proven right. I think one of the biggest disagreements we've had was over that 2014 start when they got off to, they were first in the East for a long time. The Cavs were struggling, and then it was like, oh, right, the offense is Lou Williams drawing fouls. That's not going to work long term. But yeah, with DeRozan, let's start there. DeRozan is obviously on fire right now. He's matching feats accomplished by Michael Jordan and stuff. So that's cool. Then yeah, you wrote for CBS Sports. You wrote about DeMar DeRozan and his hot start and how it's not getting enough attention. So let's start there. Obviously, it's not sustainable, but sort of what can we expect? Did DeRozan take a step in your mind this year? Is he at a different level, or is this mostly just a hot shooting stretch?
He's just making shots. This is what he does. He just makes shots. And if he gets in a role where he's knocking down all these mid-range shots, my coworker on at CBS showed me a clip where he caught it on the baseline, the clock was winding down. He did a 360 spin out of a post-up move on the baseline, fading over the backboard, and it dropped. And that's a great shot. That's an awesome shot. It's really hard for him to consistently, I think, find efficiency, and that's always been the issue. And so I understand it's gotta be frustrating when they've made note of this too, and kind of made jokes about it. He made 1 of 2 threes the other night, and Kyle Lowry was like, "That's 50% efficiency. What more do you want?" And that's funny. But it is a problem in that, one of the criticisms that we've kind of had with DeRozan is just that it's very hard to be a shooting guard in this league right now without a three-pointer. You have to be as good as, and this has been true for a while, not just the last couple of years with the Warriors' explosion of threes. This goes back to 2007, 2008. If you are not a three-point shooting two guard, you have to have efficiency on mark with Dwayne Wade for you to be really that, impressive and emphatic. DeRozan touches not a Wade level, but he touches a high level, which makes him still extremely valuable and worth being kind of the centerpiece that he is on this team. When I think he's an underrated playmaker. I don't think he gets enough credit for his passing ability. I think that he understands how to navigate pick and rolls really well. Currently in scoring, he's 97th percentile in pick and roll and Vegas Energy Sports. That's an absurd number considering his volume there. That is by far his highest play set, more than transition, more than anything else, more than ISO. He is spending most of his time in pick and roll, and he is scoring something like 60% of the time there. That's absolutely ridiculous. It's been phenomenal. The problem is that over time, those long twos, we know long twos off the dribble are never going to hold up. There are ways to create efficiency with two-point shots. Kevin Garnett with the 2008 and 2009 Celtics was hyper efficient, and the way that he did that was it was all catch and shoot, pick and pops up. If it's a set pick and pop, catch and shoot in rhythm thing, that's very easy to maintain. Not easy. That's possible to maintain efficiency at. But with DeRozan, all of his stuff is off the dribble. So when he's hitting like this, it's remarkable to watch, and it makes them this better team, and it makes them a team that can absolutely dominate squads because you're not going to beat their defense and DeRozan's offense. That combination you are not going to topple. You have to break one or the other. And it's a testament, I will say this, it's a real testament to the rest of that team, who I think is very good because they've constructed a really great defense so that they're creating big gaps that teams can't come back from like they did versus the Heat and some other squads because they're getting stops and then DeRozan is just pummeling you. So he's not just putting up shots and getting scores like Devin Booker in Phoenix. Like this quality defense leading to good offense.
Yeah, and look, I think everyone really can agree with the fact that he's not going to shoot. Right now he's shooting 60% on pull-ups.
It's ridiculous.
And he's shooting better with defenders. So he's shooting, 62% with defenders between 0 and 2 feet, so that's a very tight defense. 61% with defenders 2 to 4 feet. And he's taking 13.8 field goals per game with defenders 2 to 4 feet off of him, and he's hitting 61%. So that is just ridiculous, and that's not going to keep up. But I think with DeRozan, as long as he can sort of establish the jumper and then use it as a secondary weapon towards sort of driving to the basket, which is where he thrives and that's where he's at his best. If he can hit enough jumpers so that defenses get up on him and he has an easier time getting to the hoop, I think that's ultimately where it's at.
Well, it's interesting. So here's kind of a gap between couch analysts like myself, reporters, even knowledgeable people in the game. There's a gap between that and the players, and you have to ask about these things to find out. DeRozan constantly hitting shots in your face feels very differently. It feels the players experience it differently because the players are not going to sit there unless they're at an extremely high level of if they're really analytical. I always notice this with Shane Battier because Shane Battier would say things I totally agreed with. It would be like I would ask him questions that I asked him. For example, I asked a bunch of players this question, shooters. I asked them, would you rather have a smaller defender right underneath you that you could rise and fire over, or a longer defender further away closing out on you? And the data says that you always want the longer defender further away from you because if you're guarded, you are going to miss more. The presence of another human being in your vicinity means you miss more. That's what the data says. And Battier very simply said, no, the data says you always shoot worse when there's a defender right under you. Every other shooter, every other one, Ray Allen, no matter who it was, Anthony Morrow, all the way down, all of them said, no, I'd rather have the shoulder defender underneath me because I'm not as worried. If I can get into my vision, if my field of vision is clear because he's shorter than me, I don't care. I can knock it down, even though the data doesn't say that. My point here about DeRozan is when DeRozan is hitting all these shots and he looks like a threat and you're like, damn, that was an awesome shot, I got to guard him better. That affects how they play. Those guys aren't like, oh, well, we know that that mid-range jumpers off of the dribble are less efficient, so I'm going to let him have this. That's not how basketball works. It's not how human beings play the game. So there is this kind of effect where when DeRozan is doing this, you can bet teams are scouting him, teams are scheming him, and teams are going to start throwing more doubles at him because they know you can't survive DeMar DeRozan scoring 40 points on you. You are not going to beat the Raptors if DeRozan drops 40 on you point blank, and that's going to open up more opportunities for the other guys, which is really important because they need to get everyone involved in order for them to be at their best.
Yeah, and you know what? I do think eventually defenses will sort of key in and try to get the ball out of his hands a lot, especially keep him out of the pick and roll. Like right now, DeRozan getting a lot of shots sort of off one or two pin down screens, and then with either that's going to generate enough separation for him to rise up for the jumper, or he's going to try to get to the basket because the defender is trailing him. But yeah, I think eventually teams will start blitzing him, try to get the ball out of his hands. And that's a concern for me there because if you look at the starting lineup, and even with Patrick Patterson off the bench, their bigs aren't really guys that can make plays sort of in space. You know what I mean? And I think that's probably where they're going to feel the loss of Sullinger the most.
Of who? I'm sorry?
Of Sullinger. Of someone who can actually catch a pass and then make a play and take two dribbles. Because right now in the front court, nobody can do that.
Yeah, and I really like the way Sullinger was playing in preseason, too. It was a bummer. I was I've been hard on him for years, and so I was oh, hey, maybe Sullinger's ready to actually, be an NBA player. This will be nice. Yeah, the absence at 4 is really problematic. I'm a big Patrick Patterson guy, but he only does what he does, and you need kind of a better 5 next to him, even as good as Jonas has been in game-by-game he's had some really, really strong games so far. You need something kind of a little bit better there. And I don't know what the answer is for them. I think it's just difficult unless DeMar really kind of gets back and starts playing at a high level, because I think that's kind of their best option at 4 is to get DeMar Carroll going in a meaningful way at the 4 position. And that's why. So there has to be a little bit of concern, because it's like, well, they're playing really good offense, and I think that they're really consistent all around. But you're also like, okay, they look really good, and they have this great record because DeMar DeRozan has scored 30 points or more in 5 straight games. What's going to happen when that does not occur? Who is going to be the guy that is going to step up and give them points? Now, they'll get better games from Lowry, right? Like
hopefully,
Lowry wasn't great the other night.
Yeah.
So Lowry will probably step up, and that will balance it out a little bit. You're talking about margins here. It's how much can you really survive. They still kind of need that third weapon, which, Valanciunas is supposed to be that, and again, some good signs. Its consistency is the question, and then really, DeMar Carroll is supposed to be that, and injuries and everything else, he continues to struggle. So there are questions about what's going to happen when DeMar finally cools off, or DeRozan rather.
Yeah, exactly, and that's where, like you said, ideally you get some production out of the power forward spot. I mean, so far, let me get your thoughts on the power forward spot. Like, just past Siakam has sort of stepped into that Louis Scola role of, can I soak up 8 minutes to start the first and the third quarter and then just chill on the bench? And he's obviously gone about it in a different way than Scola in terms of he's not nearly as crafty, obviously, but he's a lot more energetic and athletic. And then, Patterson has been the de facto starter. Like, what have you thought of Siakam and Patterson, and do you think ultimately that they need to get an upgrade there?
I've been high on Patterson since college. Like, I'm just a Patterson guy. I just believe in him as a weapon you can plug in. I think that he's stepped up in key situations for them last year in the playoffs. Like, when the Stars were struggling, he gave them some really good minutes early on, and faded as the playoffs went on. But I'm a big believer in Patrick Patterson. I really like Siakam from what I saw in preseason. I thought it was very, very positive. I think the fact that he has 0 blocks is kind of concerning. That's a worry. For a guy that athletic with that skill set, you kind of want to see that. I mean, there's 6 points worse with him on the floor defensively. That he's the only guy with a negative net rating. Now, he's a rookie. I mean, it's fine. It's just, it shows you that he has not been the immediate impact kind of guy that is there to kind of do the work for you. Versus Patterson, they're 11 points better with Patterson on the floor in net rating, and they're 6 points better defensively because Patrick Patterson is a really good all-around pro. Like, he just fits really well in there. The issue is when you need kind of a game changer on that front. It's when you need somebody to come in and really kind of swing a game. Patrick Patterson almost never is going to be able to do that. Now, DeMar Carroll kind of has the capacity if you play him at small ball 4. He has that ability, but he's just not playing to that right now. And even then, the question with Carroll is, look, he had a really up-and-down career, right? So, I mean, I talked to him in Memphis when he was not playing at all, and that kid was... Like, it was heartbreaking seeing how bummed he was, and like looking at the fact that his career was probably going to be over, that he wasn't going to make it in the NBA. And he finds his way to Atlanta, hangs on, finds his way to Atlanta, and is phenomenal and earned that contract that he got. But they need that guy from Atlanta back, and he has not physically been there, and he has not, in terms of quality of play, been there. And I think those are two concerns that you have to be worried about. They need somebody to be able to give them a third weapon. Like, you don't need much. You're not talking about like a huge contribution, but I mean, you look up and down the scoring efficiency, and Valanciunas is 13.8, and then your next, you're talking about Patterson's giving you 5 points a game, Siakam's giving you 4.4. Like, you got to get somebody up into the 8 to 12 range. Somebody has to be giving you a little bit more. Now, some of that's because they're feeding DeRozan a lot because he's a nuclear inferno right now. But there's got to be better balance, I think, a little bit long term for the Raptors. Yeah,
and again, like, going back to Sullinger, I feel like that's where Sullinger as an overall player, like, not great. He's not great at anything, really, right, except for rebounding. I think he's a really good defensive rebounder, but aside from that, he's not fantastic. But in terms of like having an all-around skill set and being able to do small things in different parts of the game, that's where I thought his role would have fit with the Raptors, just sort of like being that space filler for them. But Sullinger is out. It's a foot injury. It's probably going to take quite a while for him to come back. So in the meantime, though, I mean, this is not surprising to see reports of this, but the Raptors are once again linked to potentially trading for a power forward. I think this is, the 15th straight year the Raptors have... basically every year since Chris Bosh left, the Raptors have wanted to trade for a power forward. And this time around, it's Nerlens Noel. A report from Mark Stein of ESPN came out to say that the Raptors are one of the many teams interested in the very available Nerlens Noel. Although the Raptors do want to see how the rookies start off If they can hold the fort, maybe they'll need Noel. But what are your thoughts in terms of Nerlens Noel as a fit for the Raptors?
I have no idea why this report exists. I have no idea.
It's Brian Colangelo. We know.
Like I don't know why this would possibly be a thing. I don't know why on earth this would possibly be a thing. I can't say that it's inconceivable to me that Masai would pursue this kind of a deal because he loves athleticism. He really likes athleticism. It's a thing with him. There's a reason he traded for JaVale McGee, right? Like he believes in length and athleticism. Nerlens was a disaster last year at the 4. He was really bad. There are substantial league concerns from everywhere about Nerlens' maturity. And it's not just the thing with the house. It's not any sort of small thing. It's an overall picture of a player that continues to just be very immature. And that's not surprising. He's still extremely young. And it doesn't mean that he's not going to have a good career, or that he's not going to be a good player, or that he won't develop. But there are real concerns about that. So what you're talking about now is you're talking about bringing a player who can't stretch the floor and bringing him into play with Valanciunas, who has a lot of injury concerns, a lot of maturity concerns, and has shown no capacity to play effectively at the power forward spot. This makes zero sense. It just does not. Not when you have Valanciunas, and as good as he's been, you don't want Nerlens for a backup center job. It's kind of a waste of talent in terms of what he can do. I don't think they would be effective together. I don't think it would be a good complement to each other. If you were swapping out Valanciunas for Noel, I wouldn't necessarily understand it unless you got a really good asset back along with Nerlens. Like, that's where we're at, right? Is Nerlens Noel, former projected number 1 pick who fell down in the draft and was still highly considered, who put up what Sixers fans constantly regarded as a historic rookie season defensively. We're now talking about Valanciunas is going to have to bring back Noel and something of real value in order for the Raptors to do that deal. I would be very surprised if it happened. Especially because if you notice, Masai doesn't make a lot of deals that get rumored and then kind of fester and go away. If he's going to make a deal, he's going to find an opportunity and he's going to strike. He doesn't get caught into long, drawn-out negotiations for one player.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, here's my counterpoints for Noel. I think, first and foremost, I think the Raptors do need some rim protection that a guy like Valanciunas can't necessarily provide. Like, with Noel's athleticism, and with his shot blocking ability, I think that'll allow the Raptors to defend certain matchups better. And I think right now the Raptors don't necessarily have that. Although Jakob Poeltl, who we will talk about in a second, Jakob Poeltl has shown a pretty strong defensive showing so far to start the season, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, in terms of Nerlens, I think the athleticism right there, right? Like, the Raptors are already playing Pascal Siakam at power forward. I can't imagine that Noel is going to be worse than Siakam in terms of as a fit alongside Valanciunas. And then, yeah, it'll be mostly about the matchups thing, because I am a little bit concerned with the Raptors' rim protection. So far, they've been pretty good. But long term, if you're looking at, like, the Cavaliers, and I'm not saying if you get Nerlens Noel, you're going to threaten the Cavaliers. We will talk about that too, but having sort of a rim protector kind of guy, like, I think that's the appeal with Nerlens, and hopefully if you give him some capable guards, because I mean Philadelphia's had literally the worst collection of guards ever assembled in any professional setting over the last 3 years with Nerlens. That maybe with better guards but a better service, he has good hands, he can catch, he can finish. So I don't know. It's not a perfect fit for sure, like for reasons you said, but
I mean, look, there's an argument to be made, and you could say like the rim protection, but you can go elsewhere to get that. There are other options. Rim protection is a premium. That's true, as the Warriors are rapidly discovering. It's a valuable skill in this league. It's important, and you have to have not just the ability to block shots, but you have to have situational awareness. That's something that Masai, I think, kind of missed on when he traded for JaVale. And part of it was he expected JaVale to develop into that. He expected JaVale to kind of grow into being into a more aware player, and he never really did. He just never really caught on to what it takes to understand not just the initial rotation, but how to anticipate the second and to make that second movement and the third movement and the multiple efforts that you have to have in order to do that effectively. So it's a complicated thing to find. It's a hard thing to find. But with Noel, you're talking about, again, bringing a lot of stuff back with him in order to get one specific skill, and you're going to have to pay him eventually, and that's a problem, right?
True.
Like, you don't want to be paying Valanciunas and Noel. Like, that's not something that you want to be doing. So I do think that there are better options that might be available on the floor. There are guys that you could probably get around the league. It's an interesting argument with the idea of the Cavs. That's an interesting point you bring up.
Yeah.
Of being able to say, all right, look, if Tristan if Valanciunas gets hurt or Valanciunas gets in foul trouble, what are we going to do with Tristan Thompson if he's just beasting all over us? Like, don't you want to have that? But the other thing, though, is, if you put Noel on the floor, how likely are the Cavs to be like, we're going to put Kevin Love at the 5 and we're going to go small, and let's see what you do then? Because you're not worried about Nerlens Noel just beasting Kevin Love in the post, because you just will live with that. He's not a good post player to be concerned with that. If Noel was better offensively, I would legitimately think about it. But because he's not, that I think gives you a real issue with being able to do it. Again, like, he's going to be, if he was able to do more than just finish at the rim, it changes things. Like, Tristan Thompson is worth what he is to the Cavs because he's a great shot blocker. He's a high energy defensive player. He finishes at the rim. Like, he brings a little bit in terms of the pick and roll ability that Noel does, but the Cavaliers have LeBron and Kyrie and Kevin Love. And, even if you want to say, like, all right, we can, figure out a way to, with DeRozan and Kyle, if the team's better, we can kind of offset LeBron and Kyrie, which is an insane thing to say, but let's go with it. They still have Kevin Love. And if you have a Tristan and Nerlens Noel, you're expecting Valanciunas to outdo Kevin Love. That gets tough. Like, that just gets problematic with what Love's able to do in terms of versatility. So, again, I think we get back to, I think the 4 that they need to find needs to be a versatile one, and that's hard to find in this league. But I think they would be better off trying to go for a value guy rather than, pursuing somebody like that.
Yeah, that's what I think. I mean, obviously, the ideal guy would be someone like Paul Millsap, and I think a lot of Raptors fans have lusted for Paul Millsap, but I really don't see that happening. Like, guys like Paul Millsap just don't get traded, willy-nilly. But, maybe if Atlanta sees
it's possible.
It's
like,
possible.
It wouldn't shock me if the Hawks went on they started off really well. But if the Hawks went absolutely to pieces, like, I wouldn't be stunned if they did it. But the problem then, I think the problem with Millsap is, and I think this is from Ujiri's perspective too. Like, Ujiri wanted to blow the team up, right? Like, wanted to rebuild. Finally was like, all right, I can finally start over and really build a team. Nope, they're still good. Damn it. And so now he's locked in. He's paid the money for DeRozan. He's going to pay the money for Lowry. He's, put the money together for all of these guys. Like, he's locked in this core to try and win now. Well, in order to get Paul Millsap, you're going to have to give up so many assets. You're going to have to compromise that core in order to get better at this one particular spot. So it would be really a lot better if they started trying to target the ability to find somebody kind of lower. You know what? I'm not even kidding. Ironically, they need to do. They need to trade for Amir. I'm not even kidding.
Oh, Amir would be nice, yeah.
Amir would fix a lot of these issues. Like, even though he's such a low usage player, just his presence and because it's like, all right, he rim protects a little bit, and he spreads the floor a little bit. And that gives you a really good 1-2 combo to be able to do that. Like, that's a really effective player that, and quite honestly, with the fact that they've got Horford and Olynyk is really good, and they've got other bigs that they like Jordan Mickey, like, that's a guy that might be available depending on what they want to surrender. So, like, Amir's not vital to what Boston does. He's not central to their long-term prospects. So that's, that would be a kind of a guy that I would look to target. You want a veteran, versatile guy who's under the radar. That's where they need to be focused on trying to acquire a guy.
Yeah, I thought that's in the same sort of mold. I mean, I'd like Taj Gibson as a potential fit.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Same kind of situation there, where he can hit the 18, 19-foot jumper if he needs, defend with energy and stuff. But yeah, Nerlens is. I mean, we're talking about Nerlens because he got rumored, but yeah, ultimately he is a tricky fit, like you said, because. It's a tricky fit because beating the Cavaliers is not easy whatsoever, and yeah, I mean, okay, let's start here. Would you say out of all the Eastern Conference teams, the Raptors are the closest in terms of like how many steps away? Are they the closest in your mind to beating the Cavaliers?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're the second best team in the East. I think it's by a considerable margin right now because Boston's banged up and we haven't seen the best out of Boston. When we see the best out of Boston, maybe that'll change. But look, the Raptors have impressed me a lot early on, and not just because of DeRozan. It's because I value consistency a lot. You watch so many games from so many different teams all throughout the season that what you want to see is not like, oh, they looked really good this night. I want to see like, all right, how do you look when things aren't firing perfectly? When you're not making all your shots, what do you look like? When you're not, when your defensive rotations are a little bit slow, when you're tired, when you're on a back-to-back, like what do you look like? How do you perform quarter to quarter, game after game, situation to situation? And the Raptors have been the most consistent team in the Eastern Conference, and that to me puts them a pretty wide margin above the rest of the pack. There are some good teams in the East, but they're really good. They are legitimately really good. The problem I think is that the Cavs got better. Right.
The Cavs are just incredible right now. The passing and all the cuts, everything. It's
They've solved so many of their problems from the last couple of years. They also, they just looked like they didn't like playing with each other and they lacked focus. They look focused and they've got continuity and they understand everything and everyone's healthy and everyone's shooting well. Like everything is going right with the Cavs. Now it's a long season. There's a lot to go, but the problem is they've solved so many of their structural concerns that if the Raptors were going to catch them, it was going to be last year. Like that was the year that you had an opportunity to kind of catch them. They needed a better performance in the first two playoff rounds out of Kyle and DeMar. They needed to get past those series faster to have more momentum. Like they came in, I think, a little bit just trying to survive game by game, trying to just like every game was just try and not fall apart like they did from the get-go versus Indiana. You have to have a lot of confidence and really, I will say this, Boston believes it can beat the Cavaliers. They're wrong.
That's exactly, they're wrong, yeah.
But they believe it. The Raptors, I think, have the capacity to really challenge Cleveland, but I'm not sure that they believe it. And that is something that they can get to, but they're going to have to do a lot of work, and they're going to need some more pieces. They need more guys that can help. And that's tough because you look up and down the roster, and they don't have guys that aren't contributing. Like, that's the thing. Is I don't look at the roster and be like, oh, these guys aren't good. I mean, Terrence Ross is having a great season for crying out loud. Like everyone's been good for them. But you need more production, and that I think is where they're kind of hamstrung. Is they got to find somebody who can come in and provide real production, and that means surrendering assets that might be really hard to let go of, like a Norman Powell or like the way Ross is playing right now, or whoever else it is, or Siakam, or any of the long-term prospects that I don't think are ever going to be real NBA players. Like some of those guys are going to have to go in that kind of a deal, and that's tough to justify when you've had the kind of success that Toronto has. That's where the Raptors are kind of at their toughest. Is you don't want to break anything up because they've done really well. Like this is a good thing. Don't mess with what works. But if you want to go for the brass ring, if you want to go to try and make the finals, you're going to have to be really bold and daring because right now Cleveland, you can say they are the closest team to the Cavaliers, and that's true. But the Cavaliers are still so much better, it doesn't really matter.
Okay. So I totally agree with you on all these points. In terms of just the current core with the way it is, what do you think is the biggest missing element in terms of challenging the Cavaliers? Because in my mind, it's rim protection. Like, if you just look historically at teams, any team that has beaten LeBron has had great rim protection. And the Raptors don't really have great rim protection. I feel like that's the one missing element. Because I think Lowry, DeRozan, and probably Valanciunas are going to stay here for at least 2-3 more years. And they'll keep trying to, plug away, and hopefully the Cavaliers fade, but I really doubt that too. But, in terms of if they're ever going to make a move, like what direction, what should they look to address in terms of, aside from, having to beat LeBron, which is pretty much impossible.
I really think, honestly, I would actually say it's not rim protection. Like, they need Patrick Patterson to have a Kyle Lowry jump. Like, that's a lot of what it is. Like, if Patrick Patterson, with his skill set of what he brings to the table, just became a higher usage, better, like a better player, like that would fix a lot of what they need. They just need one more perimeter weapon to where you cannot bring the double on Lowry off the bounce, or you cannot send another defender at DeRozan. DeMar evolving to where he's not so reliant on free throws would be a really good thing. They need to not be reliant on free throws. That's a big thing. Is that you can argue there's a lot of the data is kind of messy in terms of the impact of free throw rate on playoff performance and how it corresponds. I think the bigger issue is just that when the defense really started to change and the way the guys were guarded started to change, DeMar really struggled in that playoff series, and that's crippling to them. You can't have your second best player just look completely inept for long stretches. That cannot happen. That just cannot. Now, he bounced back. He had a really good series versus the Cavaliers, to his credit. He had good stretches, but they need to have, like, they need to beat the pants off who they face in the first round. Like, they need to look dominant. And a lot of that depends on, kind of evolving your game and translating it. I want to see him in the post more because he's got a killer post game. And I'd like to see him post up in the playoffs a lot more often. They just never really go to that. I think they can get by. Look, they're 17th in points in the paint right now, to your credit, in terms of what they produce. But, I think that there's, for rim protection, I think that they're okay because their perimeter defense, in terms of just staying in front of their guy, pretty decent. Like, they're pretty good on that end, and I think that helps them a lot with their schematic results. They're middle of the pack in terms of points in the paint allowed. They're not terrible there. So I think they can get by with the way that their scheme is constructed because Dwayne Casey's put together a really good scheme. I mean, look, before Roy Hibbert got there, the Charlotte Hornets were one of the best teams in the league in terms of percentage inside the paint and at the rim. Like, they just don't give up points there. And you do that with how you scheme. And the Raptors have the athletes to be able to cover inside, help off, prevent perimeter penetration, and get out to the outside. I think they can survive there. But I still just get back to, you need one more weapon that teams are going to be scared of. Because right now they're like, okay, well, don't foul DeMar. Let him shoot mid-range jumpers. Live with whatever Kyrie does or whatever Kyle does, and then from there, who are you really scared of? You need one more guy to really put the fear of God in them, and that to me is the biggest missing component.
Okay, true. Okay, we're gonna take one last question, and then we'll let you go. You've been very generous with your time. Thank you very much. Last thing, Jakob Poeltl has looked good. I mean, the defense, surprisingly, it's just surprising for any rookie really to sort of positively impact the defense, especially as a center. But Poeltl has looked really impressive on the defensive end. So I'd like to get your thoughts on Poeltl.
He's been good. He's playing limited minutes, and this is the kind of stuff that as a rookie you got to do because there's such low expectations for you, especially if you're Jakob Poeltl. Like, people are just like, oh, he's like one of the slowest guys afoot. But it shows you craftiness matters. Being able to swipe at the ball is important without fouling. That's a key component. So, he's done, I think, a really good job. I think that there's some capacity there. He's a guy you look at and say, if you can get more out of him, like, what could he really bring you? It's been interesting. I think it's been a good start. I think the question is always what happens when teams start paying attention to you. When the book gets out on you, what happens? So are teams going to start targeting more in the pick and roll? Are they going to start, really looking to take advantage of his inexperience and how slow he is afoot? Like, is that going to be a problem? Those are the kind of things that you worry about. Like, as a few minutes contributor, I think he's been really good, and it shows you, again, the biggest thing that I would want to say on this podcast, it infuriated me the last couple of years when people would blame Casey for whatever, failures they would have. Dwayne Casey's been excellent. He has been excellent, yeah. Awesome. Like, point blank, you need to be happy with the job that Dwayne Casey has done. He is great. You are not going to do better. I will say that very point blank. Like, you are not going to do better than Dwayne Casey. If you fire him, you are not going to get an upgrade. Like, I believe that very firmly. It is not going to happen. If they fire Dwayne Casey, you would not get an upgrade. A lot of these guys, the way that they've developed, like Norman Powell becoming a contributor, yeah, Powell deserves credit. That's mostly on him because of what he's brought to the table. But the Raptors deserve credit not only for developing him and teaching him the things that they need to, but for giving him that opportunity. And you're seeing it with Jakob Poeltl, and you're seeing it with Siakam. You're not seeing it so much with Bruno Caboclo and Bebe, but but with a lot of these guys, like, they get contributions. They have taken veteran players and made them better, and they have taken young guys and made them better, and that to me matters a lot from a coaching perspective.
Okay, perfect. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Where can people find your work?
You can check me out at HPBasketball. Go to CBS Sports anytime, and you'll find something I've written somewhere on there. And I love Raptors fans. You guys are so passionate and committed and into it. Like, those crowds are amazing. Like, it's just such a great... And just the fact that you guys care so much to constantly yell at me. Like, I mean, it really is. Like, I love how much passion Raptors fans have, because there are a lot of fan bases that kind of bring skepticism or cynicalness, and, like, there's a real optimism with Raptors fans, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, for sure. We are in your mentions all day. All day and night.
All day, yeah. Forever.
Anytime you tweet something, we are in your mentions. We're like Enes Kanter with Kevin Durant comments. We're just always there. But, sometimes we are too hard on you, man. Because
you're not. No, let's be very clear on this. Like, my job is easy. I mean, especially, like you look at what some of the women reporters get. Like, that's perspective.
Oh, yeah.
You see, like, what goes on online. Like, my mentions are fine. It is okay. I've got a great job. It is well worth it to deal with that kind of stuff in my Twitter mentions, which is my choice to look at. Everybody is cool. It is fine.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, guys, I'm sure everyone already follows you because, like, the entire basketball internet follows you. But if you are one of the people who do not follow Matt, please do follow him because, you know, it's a tremendous follow. You're a must follow for basketball fans. So that's at HPBasketball. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor, and then we'll come back in segment 2, and I will answer your Twitter questions.
Here's the scenario. You're injured in a collision and your insurance company is denying your claim. It happens far too often. If it happens to you, call me, Brian Goldfinger of Goldfinger Personal Injury Law. My team and I work for people just like you. We don't accept cases on behalf of insurance companies, so you and your family can make sure that you're in good hands. Visit goldfingerlaw.com and get us working for you.
Get Goldfinger today.
Welcome back to segment 2 of the podcast. First off, thank you very much to Matt Moore for joining us on the podcast. I thought that was great. And now, I will wrap up the show in the second half by taking your Twitter questions. So, anytime you want us to answer a question, hit us up at Raptors Republic. We will try to get to it on the podcast. Or if not, we will try to get to you on Twitter. So, here it goes. First question comes from Six Dog. Raptors have been linked to Nerlens Noel. If they make a trade, who do you think they'll send out? Yeah, we talked about the Nerlens Noel addition and the sort of pros and cons of it in the first half of the show with Matt. Look, it's I think in terms of value, it shouldn't take more than, you know, that Clippers 2017 first round pick and one of their prospects. I really don't think the Raptors should pay anything more than that. The problem with that is, as Blake pointed out in his write-up of a potential trade with Nerlens Noel, is that the Raptors need to match salary, and it's not that simple. You need to either send out Bebe plus DeLon Wright, or something of that ilk to get Nerlens. So I don't know. It's tricky. I wouldn't want to pay too much, and I don't want to part with a productive player on the Raptors roster, but you know, there's not a lot of spent, wasted salary just sitting around waiting to be traded, and that's kind of a problem. Okay, next one comes from TWO Raps. If Orlando continues to struggle, would you trade for Serge? What would you give up considering he's an expiring? Look, I like Serge Ibaka as a player, and I think he does fit the Raptors' needs, but at the same time, I don't think Orlando is going to trade Serge Ibaka because you got to look at it from the perspective of their GM, Rob Hennigan, who spent the last couple of seasons trying to rebuild. That didn't work, so then they changed to a free agency approach. They loaded up on getting all this cap room for this past summer, and then they missed on all their top targets. They missed on Chandler Parsons. They missed on Al Horford. They definitely missed on Kevin Durant. I don't even think they had a chance. So they had to go to their plan C options, which was like Jeff Green, trading for Serge Ibaka, signing Bismack Biyombo. And look, you can't give up on that during the season. If they do give up on that during the season, then he's basically admitting that I don't know what I'm doing and everything I do is wrong, and that's how you get fired. So I think as long as Ron Hennigan is still around, I don't see them trading Serge Ibaka, even though I think that's probably the right thing to do. I think trading for Serge Ibaka in the first place was a bad idea, especially given how much they gave up to get Serge, coughing up Sabonis, coughing up Oladipo in that trade. It just didn't make a lot of sense. But yeah, if Orlando wants to trade Serge Ibaka to the Raptors, I think that would work. I think he definitely could fill in for the rim protection needs that I sort of those concerns. He would address those concerns that I expressed in the first half of the show. But to Matt's point on the Raptors needing a third guy who can score consistently, I don't think that's Serge, because even though hypothetically he's this rim protecting power forward who can stretch the floor, I don't trust in Serge Ibaka to make jump shots. He's like the Patrick Patterson style of stretching the floor where, okay, if you leave him open, he could hit it, he might not hit it, but you're not that worried. You're not going to scramble to cover him on the perimeter or anything like that. So I don't think he's a perfect fit, but, you know, if Orlando does eventually trade, I don't know, A, fire Rob Hennigan, and then B, decide to blow the whole thing up, I think Serge would fit the Raptors, and I think the Raptors do have some interest in Serge Ibaka based on previous reports. So, and in terms of what it will take to get him, probably. I mean, again, you got to match salaries there. I think he's getting paid $12 million. I think this is the last year of his deal. He's getting paid $12 million. The Raptors are over the cap, so they got to match salary. The easiest one, that if you just want to go 1-for-1, would be trading DeMarre Carroll, but there are problems with that. I know everyone's very down on DeMarre Carroll right now, and rightfully so. He doesn't look healthy whatsoever, and it's become very discouraging and increasingly likely that he'll never be healthy. But if you trade DeMarre Carroll, then who do you have as small forward? Like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, it's rough. Ideally, what you want is a healthy DeMarre Carroll to bring you what a healthy DeMarre Carroll can provide, because that's perfect for this team. So trading DeMarre Carroll to get Serge Ibaka, I'm not sure that actually improves the ceiling for the Raptors in terms of what they want to do this season. Okay, next one from Scott D. McLeod. The Cavs aren't indestructible, although they sometimes seem so. Who do you think they are secretly most afraid of in the East? I think, as Matt and I discussed in the first half of the show, I think the Raptors are the one that they're most secretly afraid of, because although the Celtics have grand illusions in terms of thinking that they can beat the Cavs, and they have, trade assets that they could potentially flip into another player, that's a lot of ifs, because the Celtics, as currently constructed, are such a bad matchup against Cleveland. And I'll tell you why. One, who is the go-to guy for Boston in terms of generating offense? It's cute that Avery Bradley is shooting like 60% on like pull-up jumpers from three. It's cute, and he has improved a lot, but that's not realistic. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to an Isaiah Thomas, Al Horford pick and roll, and that's something it's not impossible to stop that one, especially given how many defenders on the Cavaliers can switch in that scenario. Two, rebounding. Rebounding is a huge issue for the Celtics. I think they're 29th right now in rebounding rate. And then you look at the Cavaliers, and they have Tristan Thompson, who's one of the best offensive rebounders in the league, if not the best. Then you have Kevin Love, who's a really good rebounder. Then you have LeBron James, who's a really good rebounder. And that kind of physicality, I don't think the Celtics can match that physicality. And I think they're going to get pummeled on the glass. And that's going to lead to a lot of extra opportunities for that deadly Cavaliers offense. And you put all those two and two together, I don't even think the Celtics get more than a game off the Cavaliers as presently constructed. Now, if they can flip all those assets into a third star, that they, basically that has been the plan for Boston for like 2-3 years now, and it still hasn't happened. But if they, something does come to fruition, then yeah. But I don't think the Cavaliers are that terrified of that proposition as much as they're afraid of the Raptors, in the sense that the Raptors can actually make things annoying for them and make them work a little bit before going to the finals. Because I think the Cavaliers, what they want to do is obliterate everybody in the East like they did last year, and hopefully coast into the finals against a banged up Warriors team that's a little bit exhausted from a tougher Western Conference playoffs series. And the Raptors could make it tough, because you got guys like Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, who are the Raptors' two leading scorers, who would go up against and match up against the Cavaliers' two weakest defenders in their starting lineup, in J.R. Smith, who is much improved but not strong enough to guard DeRozan, as we saw last year in the playoffs, and Kyrie Irving, who is not a very good defender at all, and Lowry can get his points there. So I think, the Raptors they have the actual players in place to potentially threaten the Cavaliers, or not threaten, but just make life difficult for them. I think the Cavs are going to win. It's inevitable. But if the Raptors can make a minor upgrade, like we talked about in the first half, with getting a third scorer or getting a rim protector, or ideally someone who could do both rim protecting and being that third scorer, then I think then that the Raptors would be something to be afraid of for the Cavaliers. But in the meantime, I mean, there's still a pretty big gulf. Just honestly, watch a Cavaliers game. They are so in tune with each other right now. It is terrifying. Next one comes from Coop A Fantasy. Siakam/Pirtle look good early. Sully back soon. Carroll is quote-unquote getting right. Bebe expected to get minutes. Anyone expendable? Well, I think, there are people expendable. Like, the Raptors, outside of Norman Powell, like the Raptors don't actually need production out of the rookies, and they have better veteran options if they want to win right now in terms of producing. So if the Raptors decide, okay, I'm going to cash in on some of these prospects to get another established guy who can address what the Raptors need, then yeah, those young players are expendable outside of Norman Powell. Well, I mean, even Norman Powell, like, he's kind of expendable, although it is nice to have Norman Powell as like insurance behind Terrence Ross as well, because Terrence Ross has a bad game like every 3 games, and that's when you can have Powell sort of step in. Or so far, Powell's been stepping in for DeMar Carroll. So I think those guys are expendable. I think Sullinger is also expendable in terms of he has the most tradable contract. He obviously has no long-term plans. Obviously, the Raptors can succeed without Sullinger, but I think he still has value there, and I don't think you're going to get Sullinger. I think hopefully you can get Sullinger and a prospect. That sort of combination can get you a definitive upgrade, but I also doubt that that's totally possible for the Raptors too. So in terms of expendable, yeah, those guys are expendable. Carroll getting right. Again, I don't trust him. I don't trust that because what you want if you trade Carroll is a healthy version of Carroll. So you might as well just hold on to him and wait, because he can be that sort of 3-4 type that can stretch the floor, make plays, defend at a high level. But again, he has to get healthy. And if the Raptors do trade Carroll, I think that will be a reflection on their confidence or lack thereof of his health. But in terms of what type of player they need DeMar Carroll, basically. They need a healthy DeMar Carroll. So I don't really feel him that he is expendable. Next one comes from Six Dog, who asks, if Ross plays well and consistent this season, like he did against the Heat, will he be the second Raptor to win Six-Man Award? Well, 2 things. 1, Drake needs to make another verse, like he did for Lou Will. And I don't know if T-Ross has 2 girlfriends, but I think that could help with Drake's ghostwriter. And 2, if Ross plays well and consistent, I think the word there is consistent, because I really, really doubt that Ross can be consistent night in and night out. And if he could, that'd be great, because that gives the Raptors, exactly what they need. Because right now the Raptors have, every given night, Lowry and DeRozan are going to give you points. Period. They're going to put up points, and that alone is going to be enough against some teams. Like against the Nuggets, that alone was enough, right? Against better teams, you need 1 or 2 more guys to step up that night. And usually, Valanciunas can give you something. He's probably the most likely to give you something as the 3rd guy. Then sometimes Patrick Patterson hits some shots. Sometimes Norman Powell goes off. Sometimes Terrence Ross goes off. And if Terrence Ross can consistently go off, then yes, that would make life a lot easier for the Raptors. But is that enough to win 6-man? I doubt it. I think he could score enough if he has like a great consistent season, which again is no safe proposition. But even if Terrence Ross becomes consistent, I think that there's still a problem there, because you look at guys like Jamal Crawford, who obviously Jamal is like the prototypical 6-man award winner. Generally speaking, 6-man come from teams with bad benches. That they are the ones that stand out. Like you look at Jamal Crawford, right? Everyone else is trash. It's just Jamal Crawford. And so you can build that narrative around it really easily. And he does carry their bench. With the Raptors, it's not even easy to argue that Ross is their best bench player, because Patrick Patterson is awesome. He's probably the most important bench player. Corey Joseph is awesome. Terrence Ross is definitely there. Norman Powell is there. So it's a very solid bench, and I think that hurts Ross's case. Also, I don't think he'll be consistent. Next one comes from Canoe Girl. That's 2 R's there. How or will DeMar Carroll? No, Dwayne Casey. It just says DC. It's a bit confusing, guys. Manage Kyle's minutes. Do you think he will get a night off every 15 games or so? Look, I think the Raptors, given how Dwayne Casey has operated his team, will play to win the game. They play to win the game. They will play to win the game basically for the first 60 games of the season. And then around March, if the Raptors are in a safe spot, probably in 2nd place, then yeah, that's when they'll start getting their veterans some rest, in hopes of getting them ready for the playoff stretch. So, yeah, but in terms of night-to-night rest, like I would prefer if the Raptors sort of held out some of their guys for back-to-back situations. I know in like a week or so, the Raptors have they play on the road in Cleveland, and next game they return home to the ACC on a back-to-back to play a Warriors side that is going to be rested for 3 days. And I'm just like, you know what? If that's how the schedule makers want to have it, then yeah, fine. It's a scheduled loss. Then don't play Lowry, don't play DeRozan. But I mean, it's also easier. That's easier said than done, because you have to convince guys like this to sit down, because most of them they're very competitive guys, obviously. And just saying, look, we're going to concede a game. That's not an easy proposition to sell to a guy like Lowry or DeRozan. So, realistically, I think it'll be the same course as last year, where, as you remember, Lowry and DeRozan played heavy minutes until March, and then they got the occasional games off then. I think they'll probably do the same thing this year. Next one comes from Mr_Malice14. What are your thoughts on DC? I'm assuming this one's DeMarre Carroll. Yeah, how was an entire offseason not enough to get right? Lack of size with Norm plus Ross right now. Yeah, I think, Dwayne Carroll. DeMarre Carroll, I think his knee is obviously always a problem nowadays. He has been healthy in pretty much a year and a half, and that is a big concern. That's a very big concern. Obviously, health isn't necessarily linear. Like, recovery isn't linear. Some things, it just does. He doesn't seem right at the moment, and I am pretty concerned with his health. But yeah, if you don't have him, then you have guys like DeRozan, guys like Norman Powell, Terrence Ross, who can play small forward. But I'm concerned there's not a lot of size there. So yeah, to Mr. Malice's point, I agree. There is a lack of size. And it is kind of frustrating that an entire offseason wasn't enough for DeMarre to get right. But hopefully he does, because the Raptors need him. Another one from Mr. Malice. JV's had 2 subpar games now in a row. This is not counting Sacramento, which we're only recording this podcast before the Sacramento game. If you're listening to this on Sunday, I will have a post-game reaction podcast as well. I'm going to that game, actually, so I think I'll record live at the ACC, which will be fun. But yeah, JV's had 2 subpar games in a row. Granted, his usage rate has been low, but any concerns? At least he's still boarding. Look, in terms of what the usage rate, that's on Jonas. That's on Jonas. Because just go back and look at some of the takes, man. He has not done a good job of presenting himself and getting open. I think he's done a great job in helping the offense and setting great screens especially for DeMar DeRozan to get open. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that struck me from the Pistons game was how energetic Jonas looked. He was really outworking Andre Drummond and then whoever else the Pistons put out there that night. And a lot of it was like him getting early post position, running the floor, holding a spot, keeping the spot, getting the pass, finishing. And those are the opportunities where if Jonas wants to get the ball, he has to go and actually do something, put himself in a position to get the ball. And right now he's not really doing that. He has been less energetic. He has been lethargic, I would argue, in the Nuggets game, in the Wizards game, and also in the Heat game. So if Jonas brings energy on a night-to-night basis, I don't mean he has to be Bismack Biyombo out there hopping around like a bunny on crack, but Jonas has to bring some energy, right? He's a plotter. He's always going to be a plotter, but I think the more energetic he is, the better games he has. So it's on him to bring that energy. Okay, one last one from Mr. Malice. Kyle's affecting games in all the non-scoring ways, but his conditioning doesn't seem at the same level as last year. Worried? I don't really know where this conditioning sort of concern comes from. I know where it comes from. Obviously, he's had poor conditioning in the past, but to me, he looks fit. I think it's just a haircut, man. Last year, he grew his hair out and he made his face a little bit more angular, and now he cut it, and now his head is back to looking like this round, baby-faced, kind of chubby face, and it's just it ruins the rest of his look. Because if you just look at Lowry close up, any sort of close up shots of Lowry, or if you see him in person and be a creep and look at him really closely, guy's pretty cut. I don't really see the issue there. I think it's just a haircut, and that was a mistake. She should go back to last year's hair just to make his head look a little bit less round, egg shaped would be the description there. Okay, next one comes from the only DJB. Are the Sixers desperate enough to take Kabaklo and Bebe in a first round for Noel? Given all the concerns that Noel presents to them in terms of they clearly don't want to re-sign him. They obviously have a lot of centers. He's a restricted free agent. This is the last year of his deal. They have redundancies. They don't like his character. He has injury concerns. And yeah, this is they are definitely desperate to trade him, and I don't think it should take more than that. But I don't think Caboclo and Bebe are going to fetch anything of value. So if you want to trade them to use their contracts to match salary, I think that's fine. Although I really don't see the Raptors giving up on Bruno. I really don't. I mean, once you take a guy like Bruno, you got to stick with it. All right. So, okay. Next one comes from the Greek Geek. Can Ross be reliable plus 15 points off the bench? What would it take? Can Ross be reliable? I have no idea. No. I don't really trust Ross to be reliable night in and night out. But he has shown more consistency this season than I've seen from him since pretty much his second year. And look, the shot's going to come and go. I mean, Ross is a great shooter, but great shooters are streaky. But in terms of defensive effort and stuff, I think that's the part that I've really liked out of Ross. Even going back to last season as well, just the springy, active defender that he can be and that he should be. I think he's actually putting that together a little bit. So I don't know if he can always put up 15 points off the bench. That's an elite bench player if that's the case. But in terms of bring some reliability, I think he's starting to do that on the defensive end now, and if he can do that with the offense, and I think in order to be a reliable offensive player off the bench, he has to develop his game to be more than just three-point shooting, more than just that little two-dribble pull-up that he takes, which is a good shot for him. He also needs to drive to the basket, and we're seeing a little bit more of the drives to the basket nowadays. So if he can defend consistently and drive to the basket, then yes, he could be a 15-point scorer, no problem. Another one from the Greek Geek. Is it too early to start complaining about Lowry and DeRozan's minutes? I don't really see a reason to complain because Dwayne Casey's going to manage the way he's going to manage. But yeah, we should always keep an eye on their minutes for sure. And so far they are playing heavy minutes, but that's who they are. They're guys who play heavy minutes. Murr the Nerd asks, well, with Biyombo gone, the Raptors don't have a vocal big man. When will JV have the ball IQ and influence to lead, if ever? I mean, is it realistic to say that I don't think Jonas will ever have that? Because I don't think he's ever even shown flashes of having high basketball IQ, especially on the defensive end. Yeah, JV is what he is. He's a space eater. He's a space eater kind of center, throwback, old school kind of guy who takes a lot of space in the paint, grabs rebounds, occupies the block on both ends of the floor, and if you can finish over him, cool. But if you put him in space and stuff, he's just not going to have that kind of awareness. And in terms of that kind of communication, the guy who communicates on the defensive end for the Raptors is Kyle Lowry when he's out there. And Bismack Biyombo did that last year, and I think when you put Lowry and Bismack out there together, they were able to do a lot of special things on defense. But Bismack definitely had a lot more basketball IQ, definitely had a lot more athleticism to turn that IQ into production. And I don't think JB has that kind of athleticism, nor does he have that kind of basketball IQ to consistently call out defensive schemes. But I mean, I think the Raptors know what Jonas can do defensively now, and they just have to scheme around it, because he's not a guy that's going to be able to defend all matchups, which is fine. They just need to scheme around it, and so far they've done so with Pirtle. Last two. One comes from Forever Raptor. I think JV is a poor fit in the Raptor system. Should he be traded, or is the potential too high? I don't think poor fit, man. I mean, if you think that JV is going to ultimately, if you're counting on JV to raise the ceiling for the Raptors, then yeah, I think you'll be disappointed. I think JV is what he is for the most part. But is he a poor fit? No, the Raptors succeed with Jonas on the floor. They've succeeded with Jonas on the floor for the last 3-4 years. He is a benefit to the offense. He's a great rebounder. Look at the Raptors. A lot of the Raptors' wins so far have come on the backs of great, solid rebounding. Jonas is not a perfect fit, and especially in the modern NBA. The game's kind of moving away from his type of player, but in terms of who he is, he still is effective, and I don't think he's a poor fit at all. I think, if the Raptors loved having DeRozan and Lowry get open, Jonas is a great guy to set screens for them and do that kind of heavy lifting. So I don't really see if that he's a poor system. So he's a poor fit for the Raptors system at the moment. But if you are counting on him to raise the potential for you, then I think you might be disappointed. And I think at that point, then you might need to trade him. But I mean, need to trade him is too harsh too. I mean, I just mean if you are counting on him on him to raise the ceiling for you. I don't think he will do that necessarily. Okay. Last one comes from T.Norm. Should we rename a street after DeMar DeRozan or maybe some small town that needs something, right? DeMar DeRozan? How about we get him with a signature shoe first? How about that? How about Canadians clamor to Nike and say, look, DeMar DeRozan's out here. He's carrying the torch for Kobe Bryant, who obviously was such a successful and has been as successful and continues to be a successful Nike guy. How about we do something for the heir apparent, apparently. Get DeMar a signature shoe, man. Come on. I would wear a DeMar signature shoe. You would wear a DeMar signature shoe, and we should express this demand to Nike so that they can follow up with the supply. So, anyway, I think that does it for the podcast. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thanks to Matt for coming on the podcast. Thanks to our sponsor, Goldfinger Personal Injury Law. And we will be back next week. And if you are around Sunday night, I'll be back with a Raptors reaction podcast for after that game. So, go Raptors.